would he do that?
Well, I'm more.
He's not even there. What does it matter? Right. Something else was going on there, Ralph. Something else.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard this. The bubble guys. So they've got all the engineering.
Actually, I met with him yesterday.
So they're
The guy, the land deal fell apart.
yeah, the guy. They actually hinted the guy that checked.
I met with Gary Blind.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Yesterday. Yeah, I
yeah.
saw them this morning. That's right.
Yeah, they said yesterday because they came in. They
Their
kind of
pace
like,
was so.
yeah, and so, I
So
was
they're
telling
talking to Bruce
yeah,
about
that spot down
that
close
plot
to
down
the-
there. They're a little worried about the power line that comes through, but it's not. It doesn't look like it's a high power line. It's just way up there in the air. And I said, he said, what do you know about the carpet? He said, I'll tell you what I know about the carpet. You need a good dozer.
Someone's going to say, hey,
You guys need level, and that's not level.
Yeah,
I asked for a sample ballot.
But the guy who bought the property across the street, or just, yeah, across the street, that Van Patten owned, is a friend of mine, and he's going to put some industrial development thing in there, and he's told me, listen, it doesn't matter what the lay of the land is, it's all sand, it's easy to do.
yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, if it was wet, that's a bigger problem.
Oh, yeah.
The right of Judy's to the floor.
But here, so,
I think we are.
Because that's what I'm saying, because he's like, well, that's been him about there. I don't know, I thought that, whatever that they were aware of. But you're right.
Really?
yeah, can you see this working?
Is that working good?
Yeah.
There we go. Good evening. Welcome to the business meeting of the Board of Education for the month of May. Prior to actually initiating the meeting, I think we'll move through Pledge of Allegiance and do some of those things. And then before we even adopt an agenda, we're going to, the law calls for us to have a budget hearing within 10 days of the vote for approval of budgets. And so we will start with the budget hearing. There will be an opportunity for comments from the public and response. And then we'll move into the business portion of the meeting. We've talked about the budget for a long time, so those of us on the board and the regulars who are here have heard this over and over again, but it's always good to get a little refresher right before 10 days before we go to vote. So please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is back here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. This is, I say, a business meeting of the Board of Education. There will be an opportunity, a second opportunity for public comment, and actually there's three. Once we move into the actual agenda, after the Board of Education gives comments, there's opportunities for resident comments, and then at the end of the meeting as well. But the budget hearing precedes all that, and I will turn it over to the superintendent for the budget hearing.
Sure, thank you very much. Mrs. Wetmore, who is our Chief Financial Officer, Assistant Superintendent for Finance, would actually walk through the budget. Recognizing, again, as Mr. Casey mentioned, quite a bit, we've had quite a few meetings on this already, so we'll try to highlight particular ones we get to the financial aspects of the budget.
Good evening. Coming up next Tuesday is our budget vote, and we'll be voting not only on the 18-19 proposed budget, also the bus purchase resolution and board candidates. For board candidates, there are 3 seats. There are 2 3-year terms and 1 2-year term. And as we put together the budget, we focused a lot on engagement, specifically student engagement, and how do we instill passion for learning. You can see there are a number of items there that we took into consideration in putting together the budget, and a lot of those items will fall into those categories. There are a lot of things to consider as we put forth the budget. We have to take into account, obviously, the tax cap limitations. That's that formula that the state requires us to follow. We also have to comply with all of our legal stipulations, not only union contracts, but other contracts that we have with outside vendors. We're cognizant of all the mandated costs that we're required to pay for, things like ERS, TRS, quite a number of state required things that we have to do. And before we do anything, we look at multiple options to make sure that we're looking at the most cost-effective option that there is. Key components is ensuring that we always add to the budget things that provide value add and cost effectiveness. And you're going to see that a lot of the strategies we implemented have to do with capacity, academic supports, and academic rigor. On the cost effectiveness side, leveraging technology in the classroom, also in operations, strategic repurposing of finances, where we save on one hand, can we invest in another, and personnel management, which is about 80% of our budget, doing some transition planning for folks that are either retiring or resigning, and making sure that we're up to speed with new folks. A lot of these questions are things that we asked as we put together the budget. Again, you're going to see a lot of those things discussed more as we go through the various items. Again, helping to ensure that all students succeed and realize their full potential. As we talked about, there's external mandated cost drivers. We talked about pension costs. TRS, which is Teachers Retirement System cost, increase this year as a percentage of salary. ERS cost, which is employees' retirement, actually decreased slightly in percentage, but because we have more staff and more salaries, that cost actually increased as well. Health insurance, we're always trying to plan for the unexpected, if you will. I'm pleased to say that we're actually doing well in that regard, working very closely with our insurance brokers, trying to stay ahead of the curve and be proactive about what we think is coming down the pike. We also looked at ESSA and that impact, which again, there's more details coming down the pike on that. So again, trying to anticipate what those needs are. Impactful instructional investments. A lot of these we're going to talk about as we go through the details. Operational investments, future-ready framework, and best use of time and space. As we all know, space is a premium here at Shen. So what is the best use of space? Security and access has gotten a lot of attention. We'll talk a little bit about that. Summer school transportation, we'll be adding some summer school transportation for summer school this year for those students that don't have the access to transportation. Another item in the mix is that we're in the midst of negotiations with 3 different bargaining units, the administrators, the supervisors, and the teachers. So for next year's budget, we need to anticipate what those costs are and build that into the budget, and then also transition planning and administrative capacity. So always a turnover of folks that you don't anticipate. As we look at putting the budget together, we always look at where we can repurpose first. And this year we noticed that we have 14 retirees that we planned on. I think there's been a couple of more, but you can see quite a number of areas where we have retirements. We'll be hiring mostly for those areas, but it does allow us some breakage of about $540,000 to play with. Other repurposing items, we're seeing a reduction in debt service this year. Debt service is kind of like our mortgage payment. So we have a debt service fund where we try to keep enough money in that account to keep our debt service payments fairly stable so we don't see spikes and valleys as we borrow and pay off different issues of debt. We're budgeting a reduction in utilities because historically we've had some leftover monies in those codes. Again, always a little bit of a crapshoot, but hopefully we'll be safe there. Reduction in fuel for transportation as gas prices are now starting to rise. We did budget for a decrease in those costs with anticipation that we're going to watch how that goes throughout the year and reallocate if necessary. I don't think that's going to be the case, though. Reduction in special ed costs for parentally placed students. Again, we never know where parents are going to place students on the private school side of the world, so we're responsible for those special ed costs. Reduction in workers' comp and unemployment. I'd like to think that we're doing better in those areas, and it seems like some of our data shows that, so we're reducing those line items. We have added, as a result of some of those savings, 10.4 FTE in the budget. To deal with enrollment and class sizes, we have some additional FTE capacity that we've provided at the high school. We are seeing some bubbles going through the high school. We saw them in the middle school, and now they're moving up the chain into the high school. So trying to deal with some of those bubbles, we've added that. We've added technology as a 0.5 FTE, kind of a growing need, but obviously as we even look down further, we have the one-to-one integration for devices for grades 9 through 12. So we've added some capacity there. On the equity spending, we have additional resources in elementary AIS and EDK, 2.5 FTE in special ed. We've also included capacity for ENL teachers, English as a new language, and 1.0 psychologists for our high school West Wellness Center that we're starting to develop, which will also allow us to expand services at Oranjan and Chattacon. Technology integration, as we talked a little bit about that rollout, we're also adding an integration coach for a teacher on special assignment to assist with that rollout process. Future Ready Grant, innovative classroom practices. We've included $50,000 in the budget this year to allow for some grant applications that we're hoping are going to inspire some innovation among some teaching practices there. That should be very interesting, I hope. Professional development, we do a lot on the professional side, on the instructional side. We're also allocating more resources for the non-instructional side. We did some of that this year, found it to be very effective, very well received, so we're going to place some more resources there this year. Staff safety meetings is another area, kind of going along with professional development. Again, very needed. I think that's helping our workers' comp claims as well, so there's some money set aside there. Special education tuitions. We seem to attract a lot of special ed students to the district, and we're adding $400,000 to the budget this year for that purpose. Athletics, we are adding some coaches to even out kind of the enrollments we're seeing more so in the cross-country and track areas, and also to balance out both the boys and girls sides of the coaching realm. And we're also adding charter school tuitions as we're seeing more charter school students. Moving on to the external mandated cost drivers, as I talked about, we have some increases in retirement costs in both TRS and ERS. Our health insurance, I'm pleased to say we actually had a cost reduction of about $1 million. Again, working very closely with our brokers, eliminated some plans. We've joined the consortium with BOCES to reduce our prescription costs. So we're anticipating that we're actually going to see a fairly level budget decrease in our benefits lines because it includes more than just health insurance. We're also including some increase for 20% of the local share of summer school costs, kind of a hidden cost that people may not know about. They talked about actually increasing that to more like 50%, but we're glad to see that that wasn't changed, so we don't have a huge impact there. And as I said, ESSA is very uncertain at this point. We've added $160,000 for security access. That goes along with our save money of $140,000, so a good chunk of $300,000 to deal with security and access this year. Operations and maintenance has some additional costs. Summer school transportation, as I mentioned. In addition to other tech upgrades, we're including installation of Wi-Fi on 20 buses this year, just as kind of a pilot program, in anticipation of students being able to do homework on the bus, as much as for our athletics and those that perhaps have longer bus rides than others, but it can be more of a productive use of time. Moving on to some of the line items, I won't go into great detail. As you can see, the numbers, the first slide shows the three categories of our expenditures. That's about 54% of our budget. As you can see, the majority of that cost is in the instructional side, with the other costs below that. Equipment is remaining about the same. All of these numbers reflect all of the adjustments that we just talked about. BOCES, you can see that 445,000 reflective of that. And benefits were right about the same in that $46 million range. So given all of the cost drivers pushing things up, we had enough reductions to actually offset some of that. And you can see the debt service coming down. All in all, our budget is going up 2.19%, which is actually the same amount that it went up last year. That wasn't on purpose. It just happened to work out that way. And as we look at the three-part budget, as to be expected, the instructional piece is the largest piece of the three-part budget. We have administrative, program, and capital. So program is the most largest percent, but you can see we're pretty consistent across the board in each of these last 3 years. And this just shows the 5-year budget trend. As you can see, last year we're at 2.19, but we do hover around that 2% increase in budget, which kind of goes along with the 2% tax cap, trying to stay in that vicinity. Key components, you can just see some of the statistics. State aid has always been about 25 to 30% of our budget, but the largest piece really is the tax levy. Tax cap this year is 3.65%. We're only increasing 2.92%, so under that tax cap this year. And again, looking at the budget, based on the tax cap in the center, our budget would be 2.7% increase. So we're well under that at 2.19%. Looking at the state aid, the foundation aid, we actually saw an increase this year, although we're still not at the formula-driven level, which would be significantly more, but we're happy to get more. So we're at $537,000 more than last year. The other items, be it pluses or minuses, tend to be expense-driven aids. So the more you spend, the more aid you would get, and vice versa. So those increases and decreases are driven more or less by what we expend in those areas. So looking at the revenue, you can see on that first slide between state aid and real property taxes, that's 98% of the revenue in our budget. So really, taxes and state aid are the main components. The other items are less significant. The only other one that is somewhat significant is 1.68%, which is fund balance. But we do reappropriate some of our fund balance each year to help keep our tax levy pretty stable. So our proposed budget, again, is below the tax cap. We're $869,000 below the tax cap with a levy of $121,993,016. So Proposition 1 on the budget is the budget, which is $173,682,956, which drives a tax levy of 2.92%, assuming an increase in the taxable assessed value of 1.66%. And I use that number because that's our 3-year average. The tax rate would increase about 1.24%. Again, that's an estimate because we don't get the true data, whether it's the assessed values or the equalization rates, until July. So our estimate right now is about 1.24%, which would be about $54 for a house assessed at $250,000. Proposition 2 is our bus replacement. It's actually 22 buses and 1 snowplow / salt truck for $2.3 million. If you recall, our bus replacement schedule for about over 200 buses, about 205, requires that we replace them after every 10 or 12 years. So about 1/10 of our fleet gets replaced every year. The last item, Proposition 3, is the Board of Education candidates. As I mentioned, there's 3 seats that are available, 2 3-year terms, which is Bob Presley and Christina Rajat, both who are running again this year. The 3rd seat is Mr. Casey. He's resigning at the end of June 30th, and that carries a 2-year term. So because we only have 2 people that went through the process of getting on the ballot, the 3rd seat, well, I shouldn't say the 3rd seat. There are the top 3 vote getters will get the board seats at the end of the day. So the first 2 top vote getters would get the 3-year terms. The 3rd top vote getter would get the 2-year term. So the write-in portion of the ballot is going to be very important this year because that's going to determine really where we end up with regard to vote count. Is there anything else?
We have a chart we'll show after this.
Oh, okay, excellent, excellent. So that essentially is the budget details. When and where the vote is, it's May 15th, which is next Tuesday. The polls open at 7 o'clock in the morning and close at 9 o'clock at night. In order to vote, you need to be a U.S. citizen, 18 years of age, and have lived in the district within the last 30 days. So when you come to vote, you need to make sure you bring a picture ID.
Official.
Pardon me?
Official picture ID.
Official picture ID in order to vote. It's not a pre-registration process, so you have to show your ID when you go to vote and sign in. There is absentee ballot option. You have to get an application and then provide your ballot back to us by 5 o'clock on Tuesday. That window is getting very short if any of it is done by mail, but you can also stop at the office and do an absentee ballot as well. What else have I forgotten? I think those are the details.
So because we're just going to share this briefly because we have this is the first time in the history of Shen that we actually have a write-in vote for board candidates, and a lot of people asking a lot of questions. So this is what the actual ballot for board candidates would look like. So on the top, you'll see the names of the 2, Mrs. Rajat and Mr. Presley, the 2 individuals who completed a petition. And by law, because we have 3 seats available on the board, we need to have at least 3 write-in slots below that. So if you see here, you'll see the big piece people need to know that you can write in, but you could only vote for 3 combinations. In other words, if you do 3 write-in, you can't vote for the 2 incumbents. If you vote for the 2 incumbents, you can only do 1 write-in. And if there's more than 3 combinations, that ballot is null and void. And we saw that with a local school district last year who had a write-in situation, and people wrote in several names and voted, and all those ballots were thrown out. Which becomes a controversy because people claim they don't know. However, ignorance is not an excuse because all the information is written right there for us to see. And we even went as far this year of making the instruction larger to make sure people can see it, because while it's all here on the ballot sheets, sometimes it's a difficult piece to do. So we literally wanted to show this to make sure people know that to write in a candidate must be here, has to be first and last names. So we're not going to, you could put Joe and, okay, who is Joe? We don't know. It has to be legible. So to ensure that because we literally have to go through every ballot and read to make sure that we understand who the person voted for. And again, if there's more than 3 selection, that ballot is null and void. So that's a big issue. That's a big difference this year, and our election inspectors will be sure to help people through that process as much as they can. So if there are questions people have about the budget information Mrs. Mrs. Chase just shared, as well as the ballot information, we're more than happy to answer those questions now. Okay. Seeing none, hopefully May 15th they'll all come out. To our students, if you're age 18, you can vote. And we encourage our young people to engage in the civic process and come out and vote. And every year we're always pleased to see a lot of young people come out and vote before school and after school as well. So please come out and vote hopefully see all of you on the 15th. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Can the seniors use their student ID as an ID for voting?
No, so technically, it's a government issue, and while we want to say
Government
that we
issue,
are
okay.
government, we're not. So the typical, if you have a driver permit or driver's license, or some cases, like my son came to vote because he lost his driver's license, he brought his passport. So it has to be an official government issue ID. And it's always difficult because of that, and we also notice sometimes people change, move, and they haven't changed their address on their ID, and so we always ask for something else, some other type of documentation, prove that you live where you say that you're living. So if you have that situation, bring something else to demonstrate that we could cross tabulate to make sure that you actually live where you say that you're living. Thanks.
So thank you. We'll move forward then with our regular business meeting of the month of May. Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Bob, a second. Deanna, all those in favor? The agenda is adopted. We'll move forward with Board of Education comments and reports.
I want to first start by thanking the Shen Foundation for the Green and White Gala. I believe the turnout was strong. The entertainment was fantastic. The band, led by Mr. Roselli, I don't know if that's his band.
He's a member of the band.
He's a member of that band, okay. Well, they were successful in getting most of the room on their feet, so nice job. Thank you for Bill and Deanna serving on that committee. I was also, before coming here, was at the 25-year club. It's my first observing that. There were 13 recipients recognized for 25 years of service. The program shows all those who are currently employed in the district with over 25 years. What was especially impressive is that there's 3 employees over 40 years. So that was just really amazing. I'm thinking, have you ever had somebody get to 50 years? I don't think so.
Close. We had someone which last year, 2 years ago, was 49.
Oh, 2 years ago, wow. Okay. I thank our administration for putting together this budget, and of course the board for approving it. I know that's self-serving too. I was part of that. It not only speaks to current challenges faced by the district, but also our students' future educational needs, and stays within the tax cap, always our goal, thus minimizing the impact on homeowners. I also want to share my position on an ever-pressing need in our district, that need being the time needed to educate our kindergartners. Many of our learners need a longer school day, and my wording here is intentional because simply referring to full-day kindergarten causes many to bristle and focus on one solution, that being, in most cases, building a new school. So much has changed since we were in kindergarten, yet the school day for instruction hasn't changed in the last century. Students entering kindergarten or possibly first grade for the first time come with a wide variety of academic exposure and culturally diverse backgrounds. Some learning for the first time how to hold a pencil, say the Pledge of Allegiance, or sit in a classroom with others. Yet more academic mastery is expected by the end of that first year. These are but a few of the challenges when working with a half-day model. I understand and support the administration's sensitivity to moving forward with sustainable solutions. Staying true to this, I also believe more can be done to help our younger learners at a time they are most excited to learn. As the district explores alternative scheduling for our 21st century middle and high schoolers that will help them prepare for college and beyond, I ask that you also look to what can be done to prepare our youngest learners to adapt to current and new learning expectations. With district-wide decreasing enrollment in the foreseeable future, I believe opportunities exist, and by that I also mean capacity, that do not require building a new school. To maximize this approach, there is an immediate need to reallocate and rebalance enrollment in the elementary schools. Along with rebalancing enrollment, I believe that we need to look to expand the EDK program and support a program such as Head Start. These, I believe, should be considered. And I personally would like to know and hear from our community of teachers what they would recommend. Shenendehowa is one of the few remaining districts offering half-day kindergarten. It is my belief we can be the first to challenge this conventional model and come up with something better, demonstrating our commitment to excellence in all of our learners. Thank you.
Thank you. Deanna?
Great comments, Naomi.
Thank you.
First, I want to say, too, it's a Teacher Appreciation Week. So happy, thank you, teachers, staff, of Shenendehowa, the 518 community, for everything you do for our children every day. So thank you for that. Also, I just want to touch on briefly the ceremony that we had for Jacob Monday, which simply put, I just want to say that was just amazing and beautiful. And I know that his mom certainly appreciates everything and the outpouring of support from our community, and they continue to we continue to look forward to donations at the GoFundMe for Jacob. And building on what Naomi said about the green and white, I had fun this year. I had a lot of fun this year. It was a good time. So looking to build on that, it was a great idea. I think we'll talk about that tomorrow night at our foundation meeting, to bring an event planner in this year. I think that took a lot of weight off of our board member shoulders, and I think Christina Wheat did a great job. And the only other piece that I want to talk about, and I know Bill and I know the board feel strongly how we're here to listen to the community and not react, and be very thoughtful and listen. But I tell you, something caught me, that a letter that was written in the community news not too long ago. And it was about the school safety piece. And I just, something caught my eye that I know Christina, myself, and Naomi, we've spoke to that over and over again. And, as a parent, I saw that one piece in the letter that pointed to our administration and our members of our board to not merely walk the walk, but talk the talk. And I gotta say once again that you're sitting here with parents, grandparents, retired teachers, military retirees. I mean, I think we feel very strongly, and I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't feel strong enough and strong toward our community, and that we're going to do the best we can here at Shenendehowa to make sure every child is safe. It may not happen tomorrow, it may not happen next week, but we will do what we can within the confines of what we can do, and I know that will be enough. And I know my child is safe. My 2 children are safe every time they come to school every day. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina?
And it's always difficult to follow Mrs. Hoffman and Mrs. Stevenson because they take everything that I have to say. So, it's okay. But just to elaborate a little more on what Mrs. Stevenson was saying about safety, one of the things, and we brought this up at the public forum, here we provide an opportunity as a board for the public to come forward to share their input, and unfortunately, it was very poorly attended. And for the comments that were made, we do listen. We don't just tune things out. We do listen. We give careful consideration and deliberation to everything that we do. As parents, grandparents, we don't take this lightly, the safety of our students and our staff. It's not just our students, it's our staff as well, and our teachers. One of the things, again, we have said, there's things that are going on continuously. It's not a knee-jerk reaction that every time we hear of a school shooting that all of a sudden, we must do something. It's been continuous, and I've been involved in this district for a very long time in different capacities. And I know there's things that we can't always share, and we've said this, often on some of the things we do just for security purposes and showing our hand if we want to say to someone that may want to do harm to our school, to our students. But again, knowing that this is not a one-time thing, it's continuous for years that we look at options. Yes, some of the things are costly, but that doesn't persuade us not to do something. Sometimes we have to look in what's the best fit for our school and for our students. And also, unfortunately, with our legislators, with the state ed, we need approval on a lot of things that we'd like to do that's considered capital improvements. And we've said this, often, that if we have parents are concerned, talk to our legislators to say that, state ed needs to make a priority of pushing through and approving some of these projects, especially when it comes to safety. We don't take this lightly, and it's actually, I don't want to say offended. I understand people have their opinions, but this is not an easy job. We all do this as volunteers. In addition to taking care of our own kids, I feel we have 10,000 children that we're responsible for, and again, with our own in that mix. So I think people need to understand that, again, this is not something we take lightly. So I don't know what else to say on that, but being that there's many other things on this agenda, I'd be happy to pass along to Bob now.
Thank you, Christina. This is our first public meeting after our safety meeting, and I think it's a good time to look back at the accomplishments we've made as a board in terms of getting critical topics out in front of the community. A year ago, I think we were struggling with the whole outcome of the land decision or the referendum in April. And we had spoken to the community with some forums in the past, but I think we galvanized our thoughts starting at that point as to how can we take meaningful content that really affects people's lives in education. And we decided to do two dedicated forums. The first one in October was on mental health. I'm pleased to report that our dedicated committee continues to make progress, and we should have a final meeting in early June to determine what and how we go about addressing the fact that really 20% of our student population needs some assistance there in terms of being able to learn. In April, we covered the safety meeting. I think that's fairly fresh in our minds. I think the comments from other board members are very prescient and make sense. And I think it may be reaching the point where we should talk about potentially some future topics. And I brought these into the public arena in some of the campaign discussions. But the first one I think would be worth talking about would be how do we address volunteerism within our community? And maybe that's not a word, but my sense is that the generation of parents that are probably graduating or close to graduating have done quite a bit. We typically will see the classic workhorses, the people that typically volunteer a lot, and they continue to do that. And there seems to be less and less of them in the new generation. I think that parents today probably get communicated to differently than they did 10 or 15 years ago, and probably have to figure out a way to sort of get more information out there to that group. And there's also a lot of practices we have today within our school. Let's say the profiles we have in our buildings, the mission statement. I think it'd be worth looking at how we approach that. Not necessarily district. This is board and district figuring this out. Because if we don't have the level of volunteerism that we've enjoyed in the past, the numbers of volunteers, and we continue to see people participating, then I think we're going to suffer because of that. We've got to figure out a way to get more of that rejuvenated for the younger parents. Another area I think that would generate some interest is how we address our honors, accelerated, and enrichment programs for our students. My sense with our student population, the focus on state testing has enabled us to focus on the standard courses we teach. This past year, I've been very impressed with how we've discussed special education, notably the MOVE program, but also some of the presentations that Michelle Mylod made. There was discussion about what happens when someone wants to appeal, looking at the numbers and looking at how often that happens. I thought I came away from that with the deeper understanding that I think we're doing special education well, and we'll continue to do that. But my sense is we haven't talked about, other than what Gary mentioned with the IB program, but looking at the whole spectrum that we offer above and beyond the standard curriculum would be worth doing sometime next year in a way that we can figure out what needs to be addressed, what's working well, and what to go into sustain. So those are some thoughts in terms of the forum. I think that this is working well for us. I think it does get the key topics out there with the time for people to communicate back to us and provide their feedback. That's all.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay. A lot of food for thought. 2 or 3 different topics, a couple of them brought up by other board members. I had an opportunity to have an extended conversation with Mrs. Hoffman this afternoon relative to the kindergarten thing and so forth, and I think we actually have a good deal of agreement relative to a way forward. And I agree that the all or none full-day kindergarten versus half-day kindergarten is perhaps not the most fruitful way for us to go. While there are those populations that could definitely benefit from additional instruction beyond the half-day, we already do that for some. Perhaps we should be looking at how we define the parameters for those who participate so that we reach out and deal with more. Of course, that means more classrooms and teachers, but it's not the same thing as putting everybody in an all-day kindergarten. The Head Start proposition or something similar for kids who do not have the cultural enrichment for whatever reason, if we can identify them and do something to help them prior to their ever entering the kindergarten. And there was another thing that I hadn't really thought about at all, and it drove me to think about what might be a solution. There are still some parents that don't realize that they really have an important role in preparing their kids for kindergarten, making sure that they succeed, and therefore some kids simply not because of poverty or as an element, but simply because they don't feel that it's a necessary role on their part, will send their kids to kindergarten less prepared than some of their age mates. And maybe we have an educational role in that. Maybe we need to have presentations and gatherings of pre-kindergarten parents to identify those sorts of experiences and so that body of knowledge that we would expect them to enter kindergarten with, so that they are not at a disadvantage simply because they come from one household as opposed to another. So there are a lot of possible solutions. Relative to safety, I attended the gathering last week with the Commissioner of Homeland Security, New York State Commissioner, not federal commissioner. And there was a good deal of dialogue, not a whole lot new, but one of the things that resonated with me, the commissioner was challenged by someone, I think, who came from basically the educational community, and they were talking about the lockdown phenomena and the kids being in the classroom under certain circumstances. And if I got it right, he was basically saying, no, needs to be exceptions to the rule, that if we know where the shooter is and he's far enough removed, and I say he, I don't know of any females, but I don't mean to assign a gender because it isn't necessary. If we know where that person is and we have sufficient space, perhaps the better route is to get out of the building. And this, he made the point, the commissioner made the point, says, we are an institution, and all institutions like to have control. And obviously, locking down classrooms full of kids is one way of controlling that whole segment of the room. It goes against the general conventional wisdom to have that room full of kids take off and get out to some rallying point, which removes them totally from the possibility of being shot within the building. And so he basically was encouraging us not to be confined by convention, that we have to be a little bit flexible based on those particular circumstances. So the last thing I wanted to actually comment on is one of those things that's more of a general societal proposition. Within the last day, we saw the state attorney general resign as a consequence of some form of assault on several women. This is certainly not the first time, and unfortunately, it will not be the last time that we see this happening. Now, in virtually every case that's been publicized, at least, it's been an older man who is in a position of power, probably generally has considerable wealth. My wish or hope is that they weren't there and didn't get with the program early enough to realize that every individual, regardless of the gender they wear, is entitled to dignity which allows them to avoid any violence to their person. And it doesn't matter whether they're a man or a woman. I'm old enough to have lived through sex type role. Men did this, women did that. Differences in standards of behavior relative to men and women in connection with sexuality. And I thought we had learned a lot. But obviously there's a dark part of the culture that still is not operating according to the norms I hope that the general population operates by. As a school system, I think we have to make sure that it comes through loud and clear that every individual is entitled to respect, and that, to use an old quote that I used to hear, our rights end where the other person's nose begins. That we do not violate them, do not violate their space. We treat each other with dignity, and that goes with cyber communications as well as personal communications and situations that are in public as well as in private. Maybe just an old man talking, but I think that's where we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I want to comment just on quickly on a couple of things. One, our Vice President Todd Gilbert is out of town on business. I should have said that early on. Secondly, we often talk here about, things we've been to and what's happened before. I just want to remind people that we're into award season. So for the next 3 Thursday nights, I think, starting on the 17th, we have 10th and 11th grade awards, the 24th senior awards, and the 31st 9th grade awards. Oliver, you and I and Gary have been around long enough to know that we used to do all those awards in one night, and having sat next to Mr. Melio when he was a high school principal, and we were going at 3 hours and 3/4, and we still weren't done. This has been a great way of really recognizing the individual classes as they move through. So just for, I'm sure parents and grandparents know about these things, but we have some real award winners in our school, and I don't want people to forget it. The last thing, I do want to comment on the kindergarten thing, not from an argument for or against whatever. The reason we're having this discussion is we had this discussion at the last board meeting, and the reason we had the dialogue here was a follow-up to something that happened the year before, and board members were able to share their opinions. We've heard from some people. It's encouraged the public to write to us with some very thoughtful letters, and people are talking about it, Gary, and that's a good thing. I caution that, and maybe we gave the wrong impression. We're not ready to make a decision on this. I mean, I speak for Bill Casey, who's got one more business meeting after this. And, I'd love to say, well, when I was president, we did this and this. This has a big impact. And there are a lot of angles to this that we need to look at. But the goals we talk about student engagement and want to do what's best for our student. And there may be disagreements as to how that happens, but nothing's going to happen unless we have the dialogue and we have the conversation. We hear the various opinions. We hear from parents who we've heard from. We hear from staff. We look at it from a budget point of view. We look at where the resources are, and we look at space and all those things that come into it. It's not easy, but it's one that we're committed to being on a trail that we're going to have. You're going to have more discussion on this and wrestle with this one, just as we are on the safety issue. Just point out to people we have a committee, a mandated committee, a safe committee, and that committee, the last time it formally met, had representatives from state agencies, from the FBI, from the Secret Service, from anybody who touched security on a governmental level, including the county and the sheriff. And there's a follow-up to that meeting next week as we continue to work our way through to say where can we get the biggest bang for our buck as we move forward? Number one. Number two, where are our vulnerabilities? And one of the things that we're aware of, and I was reading an article that we received yesterday from the State School Boards Association talking about protocols. We can have all the hardware in the world, and if we aren't paying attention to how we screen people into buildings and follow those rules and not just, get a little casual, then we're open to some vulnerability. So I just point out these are ongoing issues. And Bob, you pointed out several going forward. There's a lot still on our plate, and important for this district is the budget vote next week, just because this helps set the sails for what's going to happen in the next year. And this budget planning process really we're voting on it in May. It really starts in October of the year before, just putting these things together, thinking it through. Coming up with health insurance savings over $1 million doesn't happen because somebody had a committee meeting a week before they finalized the budget. There's a lot of work that goes, a push back and forth with our staff, with people receiving the benefits, with the providers, and keeping ahead of the marketplace. So important things happening here, and it's a great time to be part of the Board of Education. With that, encourage anybody. I should say we did introduce, for anybody, if you missed it, both Mr. Presley and Mrs. Rajat are on the ballot. And I would ask is there anybody, there are some people I think who are interested in running on a writing candidate. You've got like 7 days to do that. If anybody's running as a writing candidate who's here, they could stand up. I don't know if anybody's here. And that's Ram Lalakova. Yes. Thank you, Ram. With that, we will move to public comment. At first, I'll invite our students forward if they're here tonight to report. While they're coming forward, I'll mention that residents will be asked next. It'll be an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. The board will not address specific concerns, but ask for name and address. In the event follow-up is necessary, the board reminds the public the public comment portion of our meeting is one item in a long agenda. We therefore ask that each speaker be succinct as possible, that remarks be limited to 2 to 3 minutes. We also expect that residents speak in a respectful and courteous manner so as to model proper civility and decorum for our students, and we promise to do the same. Residents may also contact the board via BOE@shenet.org. All questions come into the Office of Public Information Officer, are shared with the board or superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions and concerns are typically addressed by the board president, and operational questions and concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent or designee. Having said that, welcome to our student.
Thank you. So not much is new with the SFA Senate right now. We did make a change to our membership. We increased the senators and alternates from 8 to 10, and it did pass throughout the school. Everybody, well, not everybody, but it did pass with a majority yes. So we made that amendment to our Constitution and bylaws. Since then, though, our 2017-2018 session has come to an end, so we did vote in our new senators and alternates for our session for next year. Officer elections will be within the next couple of weeks, so once we do that, I'll be introducing the new Board of Ed representatives. Also, the Senate is planning a Day of the Arts for Shen. Basically, I have a short paragraph to read to you, but we're trying to include the arts because we focus a lot on athletics here and we want to be very inclusive. So the committee did send me a short message. So the Shenendehowa SFA Senate will be holding a Day of the Arts on Friday, May 18th. We realize that our school often celebrates athletics more than it does anything else. Our aim is to recognize students in high school East and West whose passion lie in music, art, and literature by dedicating a day to them. Most of the activities will be during lunch periods 4 through 7. We will be having the tie-dye stations outside, an art gallery with student work, student poems, and short stories on display, and musical performances. If not listed, we will find a way to incorporate this work students would like to share. At this time, there will be musical performances in High School East only. There will also be various booths set up showcasing some of our school's clubs like Literary Magazine, NAHS, Art Club, Robotics Team 20, etc. We hope that this day is full of fun activities and commemorates the hard work of all of Shen students.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the Student Senate for all you do throughout the year. It's not just a one and off kind of thing. That you really pull things together, have a conscience, and I think even thinking of the arts, just providing some balance and getting various viewpoints. So we really appreciate that, and the speak outs that you supported.
Yeah, no.
Thank
The Day
you
of the
very
Arts was based off of the Respect Day that used to happen
Yes.
here at Shen, and I don't know why it exactly stopped. The committee would know more about it, but we really wanted to reflect upon that and be very inclusive. So
Thank
it
you
should be
very
very
much.
good.
Yeah, thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll move forward. If any residents are in attendance who would like to speak, we'll invite you. The microphone is up here. We'd ask you to identify yourself, just so any follow-up was required.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jillian DeLuke. I teach kindergarten at Carrigan. I've been here for 7 years. I'm just going to, feel free to look at it later, but just so that you are aware of why I have this here, and I'll just set that down. I'm here to just speak on behalf of our kindergarten teachers as a follow-up to meetings in the past that we've had, not just the most recent. I just passing this out just so everybody knows, it does have our end of the year expectations as far as reading, writing, and math go. So not that it's not available to the public, it is on our website. The reading level, it just specifically has some of the text in there. The writing, it specifically shows how in-depth some of our writers can be and what is expected at the end of the year. Some math that's on there. And on the back page is where I'm going to do most of my talking. That's a sample of my kindergarten day, just on a Monday. Although this is my schedule on a Monday, we do as a kindergarten team meet very often throughout the year. Carrigan and Arenda meet almost monthly. Excuse me, our conversations go more than just a month basis, but we do meet as a district kindergarten through a lot of professional development with our staff here and some administration. So we do meet to try to come up with some solutions to the difficulties that are displayed in our half-day program academically, socially, emotionally. We do feel that we are burdened and piled on with more and more expectations. So when we come up with our solutions, we try to kind of bounce ideas off of each other. As you'll notice in my schedule, it does not include our specials that we go to, which include PE, library, computer lab, and ELA. It does not have all academic pieces in one day. I can't possibly fit that in, nor can the other kindergarten teachers. So what we try to do at those meetings is bounce ideas back and forth and try to figure out the best way that we can instruct our students in the time that we have. In addition to the academic pressures of a half-day program, we do feel that not having enough time to build a strong foundation for social and emotional growth of our students. So we have our earliest learners, some coming in at 4 years old and turning 5, some turning 6. We do feel that that is a huge basis for being able to gain academic growth as well. That being said, I would love to invite any and all of you, Dr. Robinson, Dr. Wood, please come into any of our classrooms, mine especially. I would like to put that invitation out there. I would invite you in for longer than just a few minutes. I would love for you to come in for the full day to experience the morning, the transition to the afternoon, just to experience the challenges that not I face, but my students face in the half-day program, the pressures that they're under and the challenges that they face trying to get everything done in their academics, and not incorporating any of the play that we do need to in that early childhood learning. A suggestion, I would love to be a part of, I said this to you, Dr. Robinson, yesterday at the coffee talk that you had, would love to be a part of any committee that we could possibly form with Board of Ed administrators. Please invite us teachers in so that we can come up with solutions, not to say, yes, full day, but to come up with solutions to, if we're sticking to a half-day program, we have to fix some of these things. A simple suggestion I have is cutting some of these standards and benchmarks that I have in front of you. It's just not possible to put that into a full-day program effectively. Adding more EDK teachers to each of our buildings, and I saw that in the budget presentation. It was supposed to be implemented this year. It was not in full effect, unfortunately, and our neediest learners struggle because of that. And we need more support for not just our struggling learners that are in the extended day program, but our ones that do not meet the data points but still need the support. We send them home, and that's it. We start fresh on a new day with new topics. I would encourage, again, please come in and just experience the full day at any time. I am a resident, so if you want any of my information, I'm happy to fill that out and leave that with you.
I didn't get what school you're at.
Carrigan.
Carrigan, okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And this is your partner in crime here coming up?
My partner in crime.
Okay.
I also have a little handout for you. So my name is Caitlin Legowski, and I am a first grade teacher at Carrigon as well. I've been a teacher in the district. I've taught for 15 years, 9 of which were at the kindergarten level. And I was at the board meeting when Dr. Robinson presented full-day kindergarten and what does it take to make it a reality, all very valid points. And I thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. Not only am I a teacher in the district, I'm a parent in the district. I have twin boys that are 4 years old, so they will be, my husband and I are going through the decision, are we going to be sending them to a half-day program at Shen, or are we going to be sending them to a full day somewhere else? And we're kind of at a sticky point where our boys have a November birthday. So it's kind of that in between, we're not sure. So I'm speaking on behalf of as a parent and as an educator in the district. So one of the things that I wanted to do is just really just talk about kind of the research behind a full day, which I know that you've done your own research. Many people here have heard the research. But really, students from a half-day program, when they come into first grade, are at a slight disadvantage. They're a little bit behind their peers. Full-day programs help ensure that students build a strong base for learning that they need to succeed throughout school, but not just school, throughout life. If we address these challenges early, we're going to save money over time and resources over longer periods of time that will increase the odds of children to help them be successful later in life. One of the main things that we're finding, and I found it when I taught kindergarten, is children don't have time to play, especially in kindergarten. And we've been doing a lot of research on just the purposeful play, not just giving kids blocks and then the teacher going to their computer and just filling out report cards, but really doing meaningful play, teaching problem solving, teaching social skills. Not a lot of children have that. A lot of children need to be taught that. So that's something that we're finding, especially as a first grade teacher. A lot of children struggle in that area. Looking at students entering first grade, we had a first grade teacher this year that had a class of 24 students. 17 of them needed academic intervention support services in the beginning of the school year. That's over almost the entire class. Again, I'm a teacher at Carrigon. I can speak for myself and my colleagues at Carrigon. At the end of first quarter, we had 27 students that needed AIS service. That's academic intervention support for reading and math. That's over a full class of students, all of which but one came from the half-day program. And I'm not knocking half-day kindergarten. I taught it for many years. I think we have a fabulous program. The problem that we have is that we are expected to teach the same standards as a full-day program. And that's where we're having a little bit of an issue. And we're not a Title I school. We don't have as many needs as many of the other schools. And again, 27 students needed academic support. We had so many students with needs, we had to have our ELA teacher pull additional students to provide supports because our AIS providers were full and they could not provide the services that were needed. Every year there's money allocated to AIS support and EDK teachers. This year the state allotted in their budget funding. What's going to be done with that funding? I know it was talked about how, looking into the future, what's 3 years going to look like? But really just taking these baby steps and just looking at all the different options that we have. We're not saying jump into full day. We know it's a big thing. We know that there's a lot of things out there, but really just coming to the teachers and looking for us, asking for our advice, asking for our support. I know there's been meetings in the past that kindergarten teachers had no idea that was even being presented, full day kindergarten. So really, last year there were 125 students that were new to Shen in first grade. If you average that out between the 8 elementary schools that we have, that averages approximately 15 new children to each building for first grade. We have average class sizes 23, 24, so almost a full class of students per building is coming from a full day program. So what does that really have to say? Many of the board members probably already know, but I don't know about everybody else, but there's 15% of Shenendehowa's population is economically disadvantaged, which means there are 1,022 students that are eligible for free lunch and an additional 118 students that qualify for reduced lunch. So looking at that, I think, and I hope this is not offensive, but I feel like when we're saying, oh, we're going to put full day kindergarten on the back burner, it's taking the cheap way out. I think that we're doing a huge disservice to our students, to some of our neediest learners. And in a way, it's almost discrimination against students that can't afford to send their children to full-day programs. And it's unfortunate. We've heard time and time again, well, our kindergarten students test well. Their test scores are comparable to full-day programs. That's great, but what about the social and emotional needs of our students? What about the fact that each school is now required to have a school counselor in their building? We're having all these mental health issues. Can we really start that at the base? Can we start that at kindergarten and really work on those social emotional needs at the kindergarten level and work their way through? Can we create that love of learning in kindergarten versus taking them in, rushing them through the school day, not giving them that time to play, not giving them that time to experience being a good friend? It's on the posters that we all have hanging on our classroom walls, the profile of an elementary school student. Like, how are we going to address these needs of our most neediest students? And I know, Dr. Robinson, when you did your last presentation, you had wonders. So here's my wonder to you, and you do not have to answer, but it's just something to consider. Just curious how the community might react if we said, let's make first and second grade half-day programs. And we can just send the students home that meet the standards, and we'll have extended day for first and second grade. How do you think the community would react? No need to respond, but if you'd like to, I'll give you a couple seconds.
No, we don't.
We don't respond to
No need to respond. I'll give you my email address later, okay? But again, as Jillian, Mrs. DeLuca had said, we'd love to have you come in, and I am offering her classroom because I'm not in kindergarten anymore, but I know any of the kindergarten teachers, many of who are here tonight, welcome you into their classroom, so you could really see just the rigor and the expectations that kindergarten teachers have and the children have in a kindergarten program. Thank you.
So thanks. I do want to comment
Yes.
to both of you. There is this, you use the word rigor, and I think what we're seeing on this issue is some rigor of looking at the issues, not making a quick decision. I have the advantage of being on a board going back as far as 1988, and I can tell you that in those days, in the day, a decision was made and it was handed down. This is one that we're going to continue to have dialogue as we talk here tonight, and it'll be a continuing one. And I think in the end, we're on the same page. We want these students. I want my grandson, who's in Shango kindergarten and the one coming 2 years behind them, to be the best prepared as he moves into first grade. And we all want that for our children and our grandchildren and our neighbors. But this will be a continuing dialogue. I would invite you, you each had statements. If you want to share that electronically with the board, we would be glad to look at it. We have received comments from additional teachers and from the community, and that will be a continuing process. So,
Wonderful.
okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Are there any other people from the public who'd like to speak? Oh, Michelle is from the public. If not, we'll move forward with the superintendent's report.
I'm actually going to wait until after the first presentation. So at this point, I would like to ask Mrs. Smiley to come forward and introduce our students and guests tonight.
Yes, good evening. I'm here tonight to talk about our Community Skills Development Program. You won't hear much from me because I see all of the lovely members of the program, including a number of students who I'm thinking are exhausted because I see one who was playing in the unified sports game earlier today and is probably about to fall asleep. So what I would like to do is just briefly introduce the program. This program is for our students age 18 to 21 who are focusing on an independence and career path. It is a wonderful program, and our teachers are here. We have a video that Kelly DeFisciani created, and I think that really will speak to what we do.
Sorry. Kelly,
I can take a cue.
Kelly, can you come make it large for the screen?
Michelle started dancing. Where's Frank Roselli, she said.
We have 6 watching our meeting.
The adult transition program that is over at 3 Tallowood Drive hosts about 17 or so kids and about 8 staff. are 2 classrooms over there. The students spend half the day with curriculum, and then the other half of the day out in the internships. Internships consist of students doing independent jobs. They start with a job coach, and the intention is that the job coach fades so that the student can be independent out in their jobs, learning employability skills. We have about 17 or 18 different internship places at this point in our community.
They'll take classes, especially classes in personal finance, because most students in here get a paycheck. So understanding what that paycheck is, how you make that paycheck into money, how you can budget that paycheck so you're saving. So we've got personal finance class students take. They take civics, and civics is all about, especially with our trip to Washington, D.C., it's all about the United States Constitution, voting, jury duty, all of the things that are your civic responsibilities as an adult. What are the other classes they take? The cooking classes, the independent living classes, anything that's based on their personal goals as well. A lot of students are studying for their driver's permit. So we've got kind of during the class time, we've got the set class, and then we've got the individual role time.
Hi, my name is Anthony. I'm in the Tower program, which is the adult transition program. I've been in Ms. Drinkwater's internship program at the high school for a couple of years, and I graduated in 2017. And then I went to Tractor Supply, and after that, I went to commercials when I was in Talwood, and now I'm working currently in East Harvard. The program is really fun. I mean, tonight is our fundraiser at Ravenswood, and we were raising money for a big trip to go to Washington, D.C., and a lot of people are going to be coming, and it's going to be fun. Yeah, and the next jobs I'm thinking about doing, trying to do things like maybe doing food prep, or doing like working with animals or looking, yeah.
Scissor jumps. Okay, exercise number 1, scissor jumps. Jogging. Jogging, number 7.
And my name is Charlie Valenti, and I work here for my internship this year. Today I'm helping out everybody, and I'm doing customer service and stuff, and meeting people, meeting my staff members. It's so great working here at McDonald's, you know, it's awesome. And I do like other stuff, like I do like the trays, the tables, the garbage, the sweeping, the mopping, and everything that you think of. I love McDonald's so much.
The Shenendehowa Transition Program is a great program. We've actually been using it here at McDonald's for, I think, about 10 years now. We've had numerous interns come in and help us with cleaning lobby and doing prep, teas. We've had actually a few individuals that have been brought on as our staff and have been able to be paid for the things that they do. It's a great program. Personally, for me, I have a sister who was in the adult Shen Transition Program. She became a full-time employee at McDonald's, so I think it's a great program.
My name is Tracy Fraser. I'm the job coach with the Community Work-Based Program at Shen East and Talwood. We are part of the Bountiful Backpack Program. We come down here every week. We pack 200 backpacks for families in need of food every week. If it's a vacation week coming up, we send extra food with them. And we get shipments once a month from the regional food bank. These guys behind me are my interns, and they're learning job skills. There's a lot of warehouse skills that they can learn down here.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the parts of the program that are based on the community. So it is a community work-based program, but a big part of that is being comfortable in the community. Because some of the students will go to, the goal for them, some of them is to go to Without Walls
like to invite Heather and Christy, the two teachers, and your staff and students to come up here. I know that there's a couple of students who might like to say a few words about the program and what it's meant to them.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, I'll introduce, yeah. There's many of us here. And I don't think we don't all have to say many. We said it on the board, but I've been teaching this program for 15 years, and just you can see the support. Like we all want to be a part of it, right? So I don't want to say too much because I really want. Some students have come here with wanting to say just a couple of things, like where they work and what they do. I will just say one statistic. The national average for people with special needs working is under 30%, and we're averaging 87% of paid jobs when they leave us, or college placements. So a lot of them also like to go to college. The St. Rose has a great program. So we're really into making sure that they get whatever they want out of it. So, and behind me are all our awesome staff and students, but we'll let the students say a couple things. Jen, you want to say where you work?
I work at Panera on Monday and Tuesday, and I work Parkside Church Thursday and Friday.
She's awesome. Panera bread cannot be more eat there.
All right, we love Panera.
My name is Dylan Shack. I currently work in Hannaford, bagging groceries, training the cashier. Learning the adult program is great. Mom and Dad liked it. I enjoyed the teachers I work with, the case managers. They're really great people.
Great job. Great job.
And anybody else?
We heard from Anthony before.
Anthony
right?
spoke. Johnny, you want to just quickly come up? Johnny, I know you. Go ahead.
You don't have to talk. Just talk. It'll pick up.
Hello?
It'll pick up.
Are we at friendlies?
Yeah, you're good.
I do the dishes.
Friendlies.
Yeah, friendlies.
Awesome. Another great place.
Any extra ice cream over there?
Not yet.
You want to tell us about your basketball?
Yeah, what were you doing there? Uniform here.
Here, scoot over to the mic, Kurt.
We faced Mechanicville.
And this year, we have the bubble. So I got a work wife, Christy Drinkwater, joined me. And I can't even be, next year we'll have 30 students. So it feels great to have somebody over there with me. And so if you see us in the community, say hi.
Will do.
Nice job.
Great job.
Did I miss anybody, Andre? Okay. We have a couple parents here. Thank you.
Let's shake hands.
Absolutely.
Okay, you want to shake hands with everybody and we'll go sit down? Thank you.
Panera, I want to, free Panera cards or something, huh?
And then you guys can go sit down.
Heather, thank you.
Aw, we're going to miss you.
Thank you so much.
I see Maria fairly often over at Mocha Lisa. I just had to tell you, she is good, yeah.
Great job. Hope you're going to scoop me some ice cream someday.
There, you're going to catch my tail end?
Thank you.
Great job. Great job.
We're looking for you, Jen. Yeah, I'll look for you.
Thank you. You can't go, huh? All right.
So just a quick word about Unified Sports. You saw Kirk back there in his Shenendehowa jersey. We have been, for the past couple of years, working and developing a program within Section 2 and now within the state. Shenendehowa is one of the first 4 teens in the state of New York to start participating in the Unified Program, which is a program for students with special needs and typical peers. And it's a competitive program. They play basketball and they play bowling, and every year I harass Chris to have an outside sport, so hopefully we'll get going with that. But it's been very successful, and we appreciate the support.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Thanks for the program.
So we'll go back to you. With,
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Casey. Just a couple quick comments, just to respond to a couple of the board comments. And every time I hear board members say things, I was thinking, oh, we're doing that. We're doing that. We just need to make sure that people know that we're doing that. For instance, on the acceleration piece that Mr. Presley just mentioned, and we're certainly bringing information every year. Dr. Wood and an assortment of academic administrators do a pretty extensive program on acceleration options, particularly from, I think, 3rd grade on, and pretty well attended. Several hundred parents will come to go on the auditorium, but certainly I think that's from a future scheduling planning, that'll be a good, also another presentation to bring back to the board as well. It's interesting that also Mr. DeLallo spoke about the notion of how do we encourage better relationships, if you will. Mrs. Carmen, along with several of the coaches this year, spearheaded a program at Wells Springs, coaching boys to men. We had several of our athletic teams, because we do recognize that student athletes are often looked at as models within our school community. So we initiated a program, and there's a video that was generated as a result of that experience, and something we hope to continue moving on. Again, how do we ensure that our young people are serving as peer role models for each other? So that's a program that was started because of Wells Springs, and one we'll continue doing throughout the entire athletic program. And it was also great to hear our student mention the Day of the Arts. And ironically, on May 22nd, hopefully, Mr. Roselli will be organizing for the board a presentation here on your agenda, is recognition of arts. We wanted to do it early, but he wanted to wait till May, until after certain concerts and things were done. So we'll see what comes about as a result of this Day of the Arts on the 18th may actually influence the presentation to the board on the 22nd. And the last piece I wanted to share, we're fortunate that we have board members who recognize the importance of professional development as board members. And I have here several certificates to share. The first one is what they call the Level 1 Board Achievement. These are individuals who have earned at least 75 points. And this one goes to Mrs. Stevenson. So congratulations. And the second one for someone who has earned at least 150 points, and that's Mrs. Rajat. And you always have the overachievers, those who decide they want to go beyond. And so the next one is a level 3 for Board Mastery Award. And the first one goes to Mr. Presley, and you also not only get a certificate, but you got a nice little portfolio.
Look at that,
And the last one goes to Mr. Casey, and there's a one in-person training where I think Mr. Casey may want to give it to someone else, because I'm not sure if he's going to have a use for it, but either way, Mr. Casey, congratulations. Thank you. So it's always pleased, and ironically, just to extend a little bit, I was talking to someone today, actually a member of the Board of Regents. I was at SCD earlier, and Regent Odekirk, who some of you know, who represent our area, as well as Regent Johnson, they asked, what's the secret for being at Shen? Why are you guys so successful? And I said, to be quite frank with you, we have people who are dedicated to the cause. And Regent Odekirk said, cause, you sound as if that's like a mission. I was like, this is a mission. It's a mission that's deep, and it's a mission that's personal. And we have a governance body that supports our efforts and our work, and it makes it easier. And I think this is a reflection of that. We have board members who go beyond to study, board members who go beyond to build their skills as board members, so we could be a better functional body. So I want to say thank you, because of your commitment makes us a better system. So thank you very much for that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on with the information items. One that, the next one that comes up is a board meeting dates for 2018-19. In our packet was a proposal of dates. Also, though, included in that is a raising the question about having, the last several years, we've had a board retreat, and, actually, the last several years, we've had a couple board retreats, a retreat and a follow-up meeting during the summer. I took on the task of trying to figure out when people were going to be in town, and I'm not good at spreadsheets, but it looks to me like from the initial feedback I got back that maybe what we ought to look at tonight is tentatively scheduling the board retreat for the same night as the organizational meeting. It appears to me that everybody's going to be in town on that day, on July 10th, and at the suggestion of at least Mrs. Stevenson, looking at holding the board retreat from 5 to 7 that night and having the board meeting, the organizational meeting, start at 7. The organizational meeting is one that we traditionally do a lot of business on a list, make all the appointments for the year. It's not a lengthy meeting, and so in the summer, we like to start meetings at 6 o'clock, but if we started at 7, we could accommodate the request to start the board retreat at 5 o'clock. So to hold a second meeting, I will say to you, good luck in figuring out the schedule, because what I'm looking at is a lot of overlap of people out, and so I'd say to the new board, good luck and work it out. So if you can accept that recommendation, just a minor change there on the Tuesday, 7/10, then how about, are there other questions or concerns about the agenda?
For this, so you're saying, keep 7:10, the other ones work out?
The other retreat work out, yeah.
So can I just offer a comment, Mr. Casey?
You absolutely.
The big part of the second one, and I think we could handle it in a couple different ways, is for the board to actually see the goals document before we go to the adoption of it. The good thing is that, but the board actually approves the goal statement themselves when you really think about it. We don't anticipate a lot of changes in that. So what the board actually approves shouldn't change, but certainly the board should appreciate, understand the essential objectives that we are looking to achieve in order to realize the goals. And so we can then look, how do we share information electronically? And so people could provide comments and ask questions, so that when we come to the September meeting on the 11th, people have seen the document several times, so the first time you've seen it is not on the night we're asking you to approve it. So I say it in the sense that we can try to satisfy some of that through that process. And if we have the early meeting and people share thoughts and ideas I mean, you have, for instance, the year-end summary piece that give you a flavor of what I mean, some of those objectives and some of the things that we have done. And so giving some thought to that, and so if we come to the 10th meeting with some thoughts that as we go into the administrative, our leadership piece the following week, I can have some sense of what the board sees as some big rocks, so no one's surprised when we come up with the final document. So I think we'll be okay if we look at the process that way.
And typically, I would say just some of the goals piece, some of the words, the key words like engagement. It's almost every year we have a key word that we go from. If you go back as a board and recall that we do an end of the year evaluation of the superintendent, which we're required to do by contract, but it's also an important thing to do for us to lay out some of those areas of interest moving forward. And that word came out of that discussion. It's not only a look back in terms of evaluation, we always talk about where we're going forward-wise. And it's an important vehicle for the board to communicate to the superintendent any sense of direction, where we're going. The superintendent and the staff run a great district, but from the policy perspective, that's an opportunity to at least put some of those words down, and then you see them, then it gives you a chance to meet with the administrators or the meetings over the summer and come back with the goal statement. So I think you're right. I think You can share a lot electronically, they're going to be a lot back and forth. The biggest key about that second meeting is to, as a board, not to be surprised when you come in September and you're seeing a goal statement for the first time and you haven't had input and some dialogue back and forth. So I'm sure you'll figure it out, right? We will have the board meeting date schedule is actually on for a business item tonight, so we will get back to that. We do have policies and procedures, first reading. Mrs. Carmen's here.
Good evening. Tonight we have the policies being presented for first reading from April's policy review meeting. The code of conduct is in there for the annual review that we need to go through each year with the code of conduct. In addition, you'll see there's a lot of transportation policies and trying to combine some of the policies to avoid more confusion and have them in one central location. So you'll see there's a few that we are recommending to be rescinded that are combined into 5710.
Yeah, and if you haven't had the opportunity or the time to do it sometime between now and second reading, a month from now, look at the code of conduct language. I mean, it's I don't know, 40 or 50 pages. It's the biggest. I think it's the biggest thing that we look at. It is. We try to do it annually. The board has to approve it annually as well. But take a look at that. It really is it's the rules of the game, right?
Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll move forward with consent items. We have a treasurer's report and minutes from April 10th and April 24th. Can I have a motion to adopt those? Bob, a second. Gary? All those in favor? Motion carries. The consent items. We move to action items. We have, just as we just talked, adoption of the Board of Education meeting dates as noted in terms of the change on time and looking at the second retreat date. Can I have a motion to adopt the meeting date schedule? Christina, second. Naomi? Any questions or comments?
I have
Bob?
some comments.
Yeah.
I have some concerns looking at the dates in August. I do have conflicts for all those dates in August. We'll have at least one write-in candidate filling your seat,
Yes,
or
yeah.
one of the 3 seats, and Todd's not here. So we're looking at 3 out of 7 that we may want to look at. How do we reposition the dates if needed? I was able to get the 29th of August to reappear in the schedule, so that might allow the opportunity to shift it to...
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, Bob, because when I was trying to figure this out, I had that you were out on the 29th, but you'll be available on the 29th?
Actually, it's the...
Or the 30th, actually, probably, right?
I've got 28th August, 28th?
28th, I'm sorry, I've got the wrong date.
So
Yeah.
And that, potentially 14 August would be available. That's an opening in 28 August. So that would mean in those 2 meetings, public board meetings would shift back a week each.
Yep.
That's something I think that is worth looking at before we firm up vacations and such.
Yep.
And I don't know if this is the right time to do
Well,
it.
part of the difficulty with this, to be quite honest with you, we adopt them now to kind of post them, but depends on the election. Next week, that may very well change again. And so a couple of things too, that a lot of the meetings are timed around also when we have to do certain operational expenditures and things of that nature. So the timing becomes important. With all that being said, we'll make the necessary adjustments because it's pointless having a board meeting if we don't have a quorum. So minimally, we want to have a board meeting where at least 4 people are present to vote, recognizing everyone will have the information in advance of the meeting. So we'll see how things play out, and if we have to make those adjustments, we will. But if you don't mind, actually send me some of those dates that you were referring to, or anyone else. Okay. So if we look at different options, we can look at those things as we get into the month of June and going into July, because we could also make that change again at the reorganizational meeting if necessary.
Yeah, and you'll have to decide, I noticed that, Bob, that we're pretty close on the last Tuesday of the month, but that meeting is a study session, except we're doing the last minute appointments, the last minute recruitment and appointments, so that becomes a timing issue too. So at any rate, can we adopt this with understanding that it'll be reviewed as we get additional information? I don't have everybody's schedule information in yet, Let's see, we had a motion, all those in favor? All those in favor? It carries, thank you. We have in our packet appointment of the Chief Inspector of Election coming up for next week, and the inspectors themselves. We do that appointment with gratitude. We know that is that's a long day for people, and it's going to be confusing this year. There are going to be more questions asked especially as it relates to the write-in piece. So this is important that we not only that we recognize these people, but that we make this appointment, and we need to do that as a board. So could I have a motion on that resolution appointing Chief Inspector? And yes, Naomi, second. Gary, all those in favor? Motion carries. We have approval of the Genesis service server upgrade proposal. Could I have a motion on that? Deanna, second. Bob, questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion carries. Approval of the Smart Schools Bond Act plan. Remember, we saw that previously. It's about $3.9 million that will be available to us. We have a multitude of things that we want to accomplish, including some things that are very necessary for improvements on the security and safety of our buildings. Can I have a motion to, Christina, second? Gary, shake his head, yes. Gary. All those in favor? Thank you. We have bids on physical education supplies. Could I have a motion on that? Bob, second. Deanna, all those in favor? The motion carries. And finally, we have scholarships and local grant donations. Just point out, there's almost $14,000 in grants and special donations to us, some substantial ones. So can I have a motion on that? With gratitude. Bob, second. Naomi. All those in favor? Motion carries. And we'll move forward with Mrs. Mallett again.
Any questions on recommendations tonight from the Committee on Special Education?
Could we have a motion? Deanna, second. Bob. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And Mrs. Boyd, how are you?
So we have two separate things. One, I'd just like to acknowledge the 4 retirements, and then the
Yes.
SAC ratification.
We
Right?
can do that.
So 4 retirements on our support staff. Faith Higgins is retiring after 26 years as a teacher aide. Catherine Montgomery, retirement after 33 years as a bus driver. Lynn Roushey is retiring after 18 years. She is a clerical support staff currently in the district office. And Christopher Selkirk is retiring after 13 years, and he's a bus driver as well.
So who here would like to be a bus driver for 33 years? Why don't we'll do the agreement separately?
Yeah, right.
So can I have a motion on accepting the personnel report and recommendations? Naomi, second. Bob, all those in favor? Motion carries, and then we have a second.
And we have the approval or ratification of the collective bargaining agreement for the Shenendehowa Administrators Association, effective 2017 through 2021.
Okay, I have a motion on that. Deanna, second. Christina? Questions or comments?
Just a comment.
Yeah, sure.
So the board knows the vote was 33 yes, 2 people didn't vote. So it's basically anonymous, so it's good. So the board knows since we've been in negotiations.
Yeah,
for
good,
some
thank
time.
you. All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you.
We'll move on to second reading, policies and procedures. Mrs. Carmen. We've seen these before. Let's get a motion and a second, and then we'll see if there are any questions or comments. If Bob was on the policy committee, makes the motion. Christina, second. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion carries. Those policies are adopted. We'll offer this as another opportunity for public comment. If anybody from the public would like to comment at this point. Seeing none, we will move on to adjournment. I do want to call out, I think on the upcoming events, there's a community conversation this
Yes, on Saturday.
Saturday, right?
At Cheryl's Lodge.
At Cheryl's Lodge. Can somebody here be there?
Yes.
Thank you. I have either church work day or that, and I can do either, but it'd be helpful if we had a couple board members over there. Okay.
And also, can I mention we're hosting on Saturday the Special Olympics here at Shen as well. We've been doing it for a number of years. It starts, opening ceremony is at 9:15. Mrs. Mallard will be represent the school and kick that off at 9:15, but events go all day. So it's a great opportunity again to see, we have a lot of our kids participate as well. It's a regional piece, so we have a lot of folks from different parts of the
That's the
state.
senior prom.
Yes,
Senior
yes,
prom's that day.
Prom's
Yeah,
season,
that's
yeah.
great.
And then I do also want to mention upcoming events, the school budget vote next Tuesday from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. So we've got a lot on our plate. I do want to point out there is one concern about the budget vote, and the superintendent referred, and Kathy referred to it somewhat. The handling of the write-in votes is a manual operation. We're using electronic machines, but this is a manual piece. Write them in, and we typically the last couple of years gotten 2,400 people voting. That's a lot of papers to go through that night. So just a caution that we may not leave that night knowing who the third person is. We'll know what the count is off the machines almost instantaneously. So just point that out. And then our next meeting is Tuesday, May 22nd. That's a study session. Can I have a motion for adjournment? Naomi, second. Bob? All those in favor?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.